I ought to go started here.
See if it'll send you a link.
So we can give it another minute or two, Alan, or I guess it's up to you.
I would say let's go ahead and start. They can tune in.
Looks like I got everything running here and we are up and live. So I will defer to you to handle your introductions and
Okay.
anything you want to cover.
And I will defer to the gentleman from Safe Zone to introduce himself and also his background, if you wouldn't mind.
My background. Yeah, well, you know, some of those things we can't disclose.
Yeah, I know. You disclose everything.
Actually, I'm Mike Anderson. I'm one of the founders of Safe Zone. And it's interesting that our other founder is our CTO, and he's actually up in Ohio today, somewhere just outside of Akron, I think. I'm not sure exactly where, somewhere up there, working in doing a demo in a police station up there. And, but my background is I've been in automation control business for a long time. Back in Texas, I had an integration firm that we did low voltage integration, but we were also security, fire, and electrical contractors and HVAC contractors. So we did all the systems in fairly large homes. We took large projects only with that company. Prior to that, I had a company that was operating out of retail stores, and we were also security licensed. That group got acquired by another company a couple of decades ago. After I sold the latest integration company, I went to work for a group called Niles Audio, designing lighting controls. That morphed into several other companies, as you guys may or may not be aware. Most recently, we had a company that we developed and sold the company. It was a lighting and automation control company. And we, when our non-competes ran out, we developed a line of products that were primarily aimed at energy management and energy control. In that process, we developed a smart occupancy sensor that was also a glass break detector. And consequently, we discovered that it would detect small explosions and gunshots. When we took that product line to Infocom to introduce it a few years ago, the only thing anybody wanted to talk about was the gunshot detection. So we came back and we started looking at the market and we focused on that. We spent another 18 months refining the technology and learning a lot about the market and how it works and how the gunshot detection works. And so we then introduced our own gunshot detection system. And that's what we've been selling for the last couple of years. So gunshot detection is really a great opportunity for existing security dealers and business owners. You know, you should always be looking for new sources of revenue from existing customers, primarily because, you know, incremental revenue from an existing customer, the cost of acquiring that is much lower than going out and finding new customers. So gunshot detection is really an easy add-on to the systems that you're already selling. It meets a need your customers have. The news in the last month, we got accused of running ads. There were so many shootings in the last month. But you know, and it can even add recurring revenue to your revenue stream. So as we get into it, we'll give you some information that'll be pretty. It's mostly platform agnostic. Unfortunately, I'm biased, so a couple of times it's going to creep through. I apologize in advance. But first, let's give you a little history on the need for gunshot detection.
On the morning of August 1st, 1966, shots ring out from the observation deck of the clock tower on the University of Texas campus. By the time the gunman is killed by Austin police, 13 students lay dead, with another 31 wounded. It marks the infamous beginning of the modern era of mass shootings in America. The number of these events continues to rise throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. In the spring of 1999, the mass shooting of students at Columbine High School becomes the latest notorious milestone. Police set a perimeter and help students escape, but wait for SWAT before entering the building. More students die as a result, prompting changes to how law enforcement respond to what's become known as active shooter incidents. Over the next 17 years, active shooters claim more than 1,500 casualties across the U.S., in towns large and small, in government facilities, schools, places of worship, and most often, places of business.
So with the way these incidents continues to rise, it's rare to meet someone who hasn't been affected in some way. You likely have a friend, a neighbor, relative, or associate that's experienced the trauma that these things can cause. And as we begin to return to offices in schools after the pandemic, predictions are that the issue is going to become even more prevalent. And we're starting to see that. We've seen a huge increase in just the last 3 weeks. The COVID shutdown created fear, isolation, severely impacted the economy, and all of that's added to everyone's stress levels, and that's increased the level of, the mental health issues. So the reason it's an issue, or one of the besides the obvious, is that when the shooting starts, people's reaction is to hide first, seek safety. They call 911 later. In fact, the average time to call 911 is 5 minutes after the first trigger pull. So, and then it takes several minutes for law enforcement to arrive. Well, when law enforcement does arrive, the first task is to assess the situation. They talk to the witnesses, which is their only real source of information. Now, the witnesses are likely, they're traumatized, they're likely in shock. They tell conflicting stories. So it takes a lot of time to sift through all that information and determine the facts. But you can understand why they want as much information as they can get. They are going into a building to confront an active shooter. So the more information they have, the better they are. The knowledge can be the difference between their life and death. And then once they decide they're ready to go and enter the building, areas are cleared as they progress towards the shooter. Well, and that's because EMS works only in areas that are already declared safe. So they're not going into hot zones, they go into the safe areas. But all this is taking some time, and the time is adding up, and it's time that's really critical for the victims. Every minute a gunshot victim waits for treatment increases the chance of dying by as much as 10%. And every one of those minutes greatly increases the recovery time for any survivors and has a huge negative impact on their quality of life once they do survive. So these incidents, by their nature, they're random, they're hard to predict, and they're even more difficult to prevent. So it's imperative to minimize the casualties when these things do happen. So getting reliable information to law enforcement sooner will end the threat sooner and gets treatment for the victim sooner. That reduces the number of fatalities and improves the survivability and quality of life for any of the victims. Now, this is where an automated gunshot detection system will help. These systems send critical information within seconds of the first gunshot. Now, armed with the location of the shooter, the firearm type, and the number of shots fired, responders are able to deploy immediately when they arrive at the scene, eliminating the whole witness interviewing process. In addition, key personnel in the building receive the information via their phone, and that enables them to make smart decisions about getting to safety. either shelter in place or exit the building. Now, gunshot detection, while most of the systems that are available will work alone, they should be a part of a complete emergency solution, and they should be a part of every security system that you sell. The systems integrate easily with other security components via an API or simply with contact closures. Common integrations include fire alarms, access control, VMS systems to highlight cameras in hot areas, mass notification systems to alert the bystanders, etc. Typically, the system provides an alert, the shooter's location, a timestamp, and most will even allow custom fields. So gunshot detection systems utilize one or more methods of detecting gunshots. All the better systems utilize at least 2 sensor types. Now, almost all systems have an acoustic sensor. Now, these are not just regular microphones. Gunshots are really loud, around 130 dB, and they contain a lot of really low frequency energy. So a normal microphone doesn't record that energy with the required detail for gunshot analysis. I would recommend avoiding any system that is acoustic only, and there are a couple on the market. While the sensors can be designed to provide detail, utilizing only acoustics results in a lot of misdiagnosed events, false alarms. The characteristics of audio don't change just because we're talking about gunshots. The energy in the signal decays rapidly with distance, and obstacles between the firearm and the sensor can further reduce the acoustic signal. Now, the second most common sensor is muzzle flash detection. The most common way is with a passive infrared sensor. And that provides a binary detection of the presence of a certain wavelength of infrared as a high magnitude impulse. And now you couple that with the acoustic signature that can provide much more reliable detection of a gunshot. However, it doesn't provide detailed data for analysis. We believe a better way is to utilize a multiple wavelength spectrometer to provide a full spectral analysis of the muzzle flash. Now, that's the only way to reliably detect suppressed discharge, firearm discharges, and even report firearm types. I'm not aware of any available gunshot detection system that relies solely on muzzle flash detection. Now, it is important to know that whatever muzzle flash detection is utilized, whatever sensor they do, whatever method they use, it has to see the firearm discharge. So they are line of sight. You should also be aware that most glass is not transmissive of the IR wavelengths that are critical to analyzing gunshot. So a window is opaque to most of the IR frequencies that we need. So a window or a glass door is an obstacle to the sensor's line of sight. Now, the third sensor that is utilized in a lot of gunshot detection systems is a concussion sensor. I know of at least one system available that is concussion only. Now, the concussion devices measure an atmospheric pressure change created by the pressure wave from a gunshot. There are a few ways that people do it. Most are based on measuring displacement of a diaphragm in a known container caused by that pressure wave. And the simplest of those measure the displacement in one direction, but the most sophisticated will measure that displacement in 3 axes. So you want to look for, the more information, the better, right? So now once the data is captured from a gunshot, you get this event signature. It's important to know how the system manages the information. So basic systems have a binary decision tree that's resident in each device. Think of that kind of like the way a smoke detector works. If it detects, if the sensor data exceeds the threshold for that's preset for that sensor, an alert is issued. So then the next level of system up would be use some kind of computer processing and algorithms to perform a basic analysis of the data captured by the sensors. And then when all that combined data exceeds certain thresholds, an alert is issued. And then the more sophisticated gunshot detection systems perform a formal analysis of all the captured data with a machine learning system. Now, there are different levels of machine learning, just like everything else. A machine learning system actually learns by comparing newly captured information with a known set of information in a database. So the larger and more detailed that database, the better the system performs. And usually those kind of systems report a confidence level on each piece of information. Like 97% confidence that we've detected a gunshot, 85% likely it's a handgun, that kind of thing. So, and typically alerts from these systems are sent to a monitoring station, much the same way as a fire or perimeter security system. And then the monitoring station confirms the alert and notifies 911. So communication is obviously critical to the performance of any of these emergency alert systems. And I mean, gunshot detection is certainly no exception. Getting relevant information to stakeholders quickly is critical. Push notifications to key stakeholders' phones, text, email messages, and public address system announcements are all common ways to do that. Very few gunshot detection systems include those communication methods native in their system. They rely on integrating third-party applications like Everbridge or something similar. Those integrations can get complicated and they do introduce potential failure points in the system, but they're not unlike what you guys are already using and doing. So you already have a pretty good handle on how to make that work. A lot of times the gunshot systems require a PC to be functioning on site just to manage communication. And so you want to be aware of that, whether you want to put a UPS on your PC or have some kind of backups, things like that. Communication to 911 is sometimes a hurdle. If you want to bypass a monitoring station and avoid the human element there and communicate directly to 911, that gets to be a challenge at times. A lot of systems to do that require a laptop be installed at the call center, either at the police station or at the local 911 PSAP. And then a VPN is established between that PC and a PC at the site. There are some systems that make a robocall to 911. Now that's technically not a legal solution, but the reality is in practice, it seems unlikely to me that anyone would be prosecuted for making a robocall in the case of a real emergency. If you've gotten some false alarms, that might be another matter entirely, but speculation. So the 911 system was originally built out in the 1960s, and it was designed for the technology at the time, and that is analog dial-in calls. There have been very few updates to that infrastructure, just like all the other infrastructure in the country since then. The bandwidth of the system is pretty limited. So there's a company called Rapid SOS, and they've developed a completely digital communication network for 911 nationwide. They're the only ones that have that. They have significantly increased the bandwidth available for 911 communications, and they support metadata transmission, displaying data directly on existing dispatch terminals. So Rapid SOS is the network used by AT&T, Apple, Verizon, and all the cell phone carriers to connect 911 calls. And so that is an option for some emergency alert systems as well. So other things to think about when you're selecting your gunshot detection system vendor, you know, is the product readily available? Can you get it when you need it? What's their training like? How available is it? How long does it take? How much re-upping do you have to do? How expensive is it? And then, you know, support from the company. When you need help, you know, they need to be available to provide the help you need. And then, of course, you should always consider the margins you can make. It needs to be a profitable system for you to deal with it at the time of sale, and hopefully provides recurring revenue as well. So, you know, your current customers are great prospects. Any facility with public access should have some sort of gunfire alert system. It's an opportunity for you to reach out to your existing customers for an upgrade and increase the revenue from every new customer. So we think gunshot detection is a natural add-on to what you're already doing, and everyone should be doing it. So I can't speak to the economics for other systems. I can describe the opportunity with Safe Zone. These are real numbers based on real projects. And a project with 200 detectors contributes more than $65,000 in margin at times of sale and adds $1,000 to your annual recurring revenue. It doesn't take very long to put in a 200 detector system. It's a one-day install. Our history indicates that the real average is more than double that number. The actual, but we wanted to be conservative here. The real number is our average system size so far is 474 detectors. And when you consider the number of potential customers, the needs they have, and the ease of installation, these numbers add up very, very quickly. So now for the commercial.
I don't know.
I'll take a minute to promote our product. We have our gunshot detector is available in two versions. They're identical except for how they get power and connect to the network. One's Wi-Fi, one's power over Ethernet. They're small. They're easily installed with the included hardware. They go in the ceiling corner on a wall or flat on the ceiling. They're available from the distributors you're already doing business with. And like I said, dealer margins are about 45%. Training is easy. It's easy to get started in the business. All the training is online. It can be completed in less than 2 hours. Just visit our website. That'll get you, it has a link to the training academy. That'll get you certified. And once you're certified, you can get samples at reduced cost and get the gunshot detection test kit. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
So since everyone's going to jump in at the same time, I'll start because
Okay.
I've been always in charge of kickstarting. So you made the comment about the 200 sensor.
So
We're getting background noise from someplace here. Hold on.
Yeah, that's
Mark again.
Mark again. Yeah. Just need to mute him.
So let me ask the question. So 200 sensors. Give an example of geographically square footage or however would be appropriate to identify that.
Well, 200 would be a 20,000 square foot building.
Okay.
Right. So you roughly, actually be a little less than that. I mean, the real number is about 900 square feet. So what you typically do to get a rule of thumb, right? Use 1,000 square feet per detector, add 10%. So if you got a 100,000 square foot building, figure it's 110 detectors, and that'll get you pretty close.
So then I'll flip the question. Average elementary school or average middle
Average
school,
schools have been about, it depends. Elementary schools are between 75 and 100. Middle schools about 100 to 120, and then high schools are maybe 150 to 200. Again, depends on the size of the school. I mean, there
Right,
are some
right.
schools. We have one high school. It's a private school. And it's grade 6 through 12, and it's got 280 detectors in it. But that's one of the larger schools.
So give an example of, take me through I guess, the mechanics of an incident. So you have a situation, obviously, where there's a gun fired in a classroom. So
Okay.
what physically happens on site? What goes off site? Is there a step where the on site kind of investigates prior to something happening off site? Kind of walk through that part.
Okay, so the way that 911 works, to be completely legal, you have to have a two-factor authentication before the call to 911 gets made. So what we do is we send push notifications to everyone's cell phone. So in a school, your SRO, your principal, maybe a couple of key teachers, custodian, those people would get the initial push notification. And then there's a button that they push. And when any one of those people pushes that button, the data is released and transmitted immediately to 911. And so it pops up on their screen with a map showing the school, an internal floor plan showing the location of the shooter, what kind of weapon he has, and timestamp and that sort of thing. At the same time, that person is connected over an E911 call to that dispatcher at 911. And Rapid SOS handles all that transaction, so that you actually get that person talking to the dispatcher that has that information. And then depending on the 911 center, that information could be transmitted out to the law enforcement vehicles on site that are being dispatched on site. Some 911 centers do that, some do not. Some want the individual officers to have the information, some do not. And it's a matter of procedure and different ways to approach the things. But that's, we support all of those. So it's however local law enforcement wants to proceed. But assume that, the information gets to the dispatcher gives the information to the officers via radio. The officers are on their way to the site immediately, and they know what they're faced with before they ever arrive. They know what kind of weapon they're going to face, so they know what body armor to put on. Whether, they're more concerned about whether it's a long barrel or a short barrel, right? That's their number one thing, or a shotgun. So they have that information so they can prepare, and then they can plan their tactics to go in. They have someone on site that has the map that shows them exactly where the shooter is in the building. So they know exactly what they're doing when they arrive, and they can deploy immediately and end the threat that much sooner.
So realistically, it's the difference between responding to a building and responding to a room is really what it comes down
Yeah.
to.
Oh yeah. Absolutely true. Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So, well, I'll send you the bill for that later. So,
All right.
so with multiple sensors, obviously, if you have an incident in a particular classroom, obviously that sensor is point of incident.
Correct.
Now, as the active shooters theoretically starts to move through the facility,
Yes.
what happens at that point then?
Every time a trigger is pulled, the system sends an update on location and firearm type. So where that becomes really important is if you have multiple shooters with multiple weapon types, or if you have a shooter that's moving rapidly through a building. And so the thing will update every time it registers a gunshot. And typically a gunshot will register, since because of the low cost of our sensor, we get much higher sensor density. So we usually will pick it up with 3 or 4 sensors. Every shot gets picked up by 3 or 4 detectors. And then those are all averaged, those are all analyzed together to get even a more clear picture of what's happening on the ground. So we provide a lot of detail to law enforcement in those situations.
So
I got a couple questions if that's all right, Dale.
there we go. No, I was waiting for someone else to jump in, so please do.
I mean, we've looked at it with some of our dealers, and not your specific system, but so my question is much more, I guess, 10,000 foot level. What do you guys carry in terms of product liability insurance? What is the insurance liability related to this? I know, and I'm kind of curious as to Neil, and I don't know if you guys are doing it over at Rapid, but I know our insurance company, when we said, hey, we want to do this with one of the other competing brands, they're like, you want to monitor what? Do you realize how much it's going to cost in additional insurance?
I
So
can
I'm
tell
kind
you
of curious
exactly how much
how
it
you
costs
guys are
in
getting
additional
over
insurance.
all those problems from a practical point of view.
So from a practical point of view, we carry product liability insurance related specifically to the product. And to your point, it is not an inexpensive proposition. Our product liability policy is actually a Lloyd's of London policy. And so that tells you right there how it's not cheap. But we provide a certificate listing you as an additional insured, every dealer. That's part of the training, is that you become an additional insured on our policy. So we indemnify you on that.
And what about the monitoring component of that?
We do the monitoring. No one else does our monitoring.
So you're not working with any third-party central stations to
Nope.
provide anything. So
Nope,
okay.
nope. It's all vertical. We do it all. And that's how we avoid a lot of that, because to your point, the monitoring stations are, they have models and history and experience with fire, which would be the closest thing probably, but they're all afraid of gunshots, and it's because you're guaranteed to have a victim, at least one. You don't have an active shooter incident without at least one victim. Whereas a fire, if things work right, you have no victims, right? But so yeah, the insurance is it's the most expensive operating cost for my business.
And then, excuse me, this is Alan. Then what do you charge your dealers to monitor the system? And,
$20 a year.
How much?
$20 per year.
Oh, that's reasonable.
Per detector.
Per detector. Are those detectors, by the way, wireless or are they wired?
Either. They have both. We have one of both. We have one that's Wi-Fi and we have a version that's PoE.
Mm-hmm. And then your example gave $1,000 a year on the as a typical monitoring.
Well, we're assuming a 200 detector system. We're charging you $20 a detector. You're going to sell it to your customer for 25. So you're making $5 per detector per year. But again, we're trying to be super conservative there. I mean, if you charge $50 a detector per year, then, because we'll do it either way. We'll either bill the customer directly and remit a share to the dealer, or we'll sell the monitoring to the dealer and let the dealer resell it. We'll work both ways.
And some of that could fluctuate depending on the existing relationship that dealer already has. So if they're providing, right?
Yeah, nobody just charges $25.
Right.
To their customer, because they say, well, okay, the price is $25, but there's a $10 a year maintenance contract that has to go on that, and we got to come out once a year and do a test. And I mean, you guys know how to do that.
Right. And obviously my point being is that if there's a bundling opportunity there because you're already doing intrusion, you're already doing
Yep.
fire, you're doing video monitoring, you're doing all of these other,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, it just
recurring
becomes an
services.
it's
Why
an
would the
incremental
dealer
increase.
not blend that in?
Right.
Where conversely, if they don't have that, then maybe they wouldn't. So yeah,
Correct.
I could see that being on a case by case. So
Right.
using bundling, I guess, as my stepping off point. So where do you see, you know, from the dealer base that you're already working with, you know, obviously you just have to read the newspaper to figure out obviously where some of the more likely candidates are. Obviously schools have issues, certain size manufacturing facilities, things like that. How do you see your dealers presenting this to their customers? Do they
Well,
target
lots of
niches
ways,
or-
right? I mean, you've got distribution centers are now a huge target.
Mhm.
FedEx, Amazon, UPS, those guys, right? Grocery stores are a big target now, all of a sudden. You know, schools, that's the obvious one, right? But
Right.
house of worship, especially certain of those are targeted. I mean, they're specifically targeted, and they get targeted way too often for them to completely ignore it. Any kind of late night retail, quick service restaurants, convenience stores, anybody that has employees working between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., OSHA takes a real dim view of them not taking advantage of any available technology to mitigate any kind of issues that would happen in those hours, what they call late night retail. I'll tell you something really interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. The school superintendent in Broward County, where Parkland shooting occurred, got arrested yesterday for culpability in the shooting, for having funds appropriated for school security and spending those on in a different manner.
Wow.
So he was held personally accountable, and their attorney. So those two people were arrested yesterday for personal accountability for Parkland shooting. That is a scary precedent for anybody that's on a school board or as a school superintendent.
Well, and there was a lot of, I mean, going back to the days of Columbine. So, I mean, this is obviously this isn't new.
Right.
But I mean, I know where I'm based in Western Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania itself passed legislation within 6 months after Columbine, obviously was not in Pennsylvania, where every school district was mandated to have security and safety committees. And, you know, they were drawing in people from PTA and teachers unions and administrators, et cetera, and again, community. But I find it interesting now, to your point, some of those individuals may not have been quite as receptive to participating because now all of a sudden, you know, well, you decided this and this happened.
Right.
So yeah,
that's potential for personal liability. I tell you one thing we have learned with schools, especially because people, you know, the objection with chasing schools is always, well, the budget cycles are way too long.
Right.
And but one presentation at the PTA meeting, folks, this detector could save your child's life, and it's going to cost you $15 a year. Right? If I can get $15 from each one of you parents, we can put this system in. Is your child's life worth $15? It doesn't take the PTA long to come up with a check.
Yeah.
Mike, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One, are there UL standards for gunshot detection yet?
There are not. We actually are working with UL to try to get those in place.
And then the other question I had, you had mentioned like places of worship. How do the detectors or like placement when you have a wide open area, how do you place detectors in those areas?
Typically in those larger auditorium type rooms, we just put them around the perimeter at about 10 feet off the ceiling and space them enough to get enough coverage. You know, we're typically they're wider than the range of the thing but they're also wide open. So if you've got enough detectors, you get enough overlap that we've been pretty successful in those large auditoriums.
Thank you.
Mike, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
It appears your product is strictly for indoor use.
Correct.
Is there anything on the roadmap for outdoor applications?
Outdoor is the physics change dramatically. We really depend on an adjacent wall for compression of that pressure wave and the acoustic signature. The best guys that are doing outdoor is ShotSpotter, but I mean it's a $250,000 hit to put in a system. So a lot of places can't afford that. We do have, you know, schools here in Florida don't have enclosed hallways. So like all the hallways are breezeways. We do have a system that's been installed about 3 years in one of those environments. The biggest challenge we've had there, frankly, is spiders. They cover up the lens. So you have to go through and sweep them about every 6 months. But outside of that, it's worked pretty well.
Okay, great.
And to be fair, in that, if you look at our website, you'll see a video of a guy with an AR-15 in a high school. It's that high school. So we've done a lot of live shootings there. We have this giant steel box that we take in. It's a bullet bunker. And so we shoot live ammo during our tests. We're not firing blank cartridges or anything. So we've got this guy with an AR-15 that comes in and shoots into this big steel box.
And is there a cost to become a certified integrator?
No cost for training or to be certified. There is a cost for the test kit, and we do require that every system be go through a live audited test before going live, and that test kit's $400.
And just a note on your website under detector types, it looks like the pricing's a little bit different than what you showed on your presentation. So,
oh, it is.
Yeah, it says $199 for the Wi-Fi and $299 for the PoE.
Yeah, I thought that got corrected. It was supposed to be corrected. We did have a price increase.
Okay.
So we went up $50.
You had mentioned down in Florida, you had the one where they have to go and sweep out the detectors every 6 months. Is this a trouble signal that comes in through that, or are these things supervised in that way, or what prevents that from?
The devices are supervised for tamper and diagnostic operation. Unfortunately, a spider web covering the lens is not part of those diagnostics. We haven't figured out how to do that yet, but we're working on it. So right now, the ones that are kind of indoor outdoor, they just go out and 6 months, they probably haven't swept them since they've been installed. If you want to know the truth, it's just probably the first year and a half they were installed, we went out and then we swept them, and then because we were doing some testing, and so we reminded them to watch them. And I don't know if they're sweeping them or not. Actually, John would probably know more than me about that.
Yeah, so can they be, if this was premeditated and somebody went in and was planning on doing this in, that your system's installed, they're planning on going in here next week, and they went over and they simply took a piece of Scotch tape and put it over that. Would that?
No, because so the only thing that they can cover up would be the lens for the spectrometer. So we might not get a muzzle flash, but we're going to get an acoustic signature. We're going to get a concussion signature, and that's enough for us to report a gunshot. So what would happen in that scenario is that we would detect the gunshot. We would report the confidence of probably around 85 or 90%, but the firearm type confidence would go down some if we couldn't see the muzzle flash.
Got it.
When that eater fails, you know what I mean?
Yes, I have a question. This is Alan. On the math, you said that a typical system had about 200 of these devices out there.
Right.
Like, and you charge then $20 a year. Is that
Yep.
correct? For per device.
Yep.
So that got to $4,000 per year, which is about, say, $350 a month or something like that.
Right.
So that would be the charge of the monitoring. Now, what would the dealer get out of that, or would we add on to that $20 per device?
You would add, if you're paying us the 20, you would add on to it. If we're billing the customer directly, we're going to charge them 25, which is going to be $5,000 a year, and that's where the $1,000 recurring revenue comes from. But if you're paying us 20 as a dealer, then you're reselling it for probably $5,500, $6,000 with maintenance, something along those lines.
Okay, so we would charge hypothetically 25 a month.
Yes.
For the monitor.
Per year.
I'm sorry.
Right. It's basically $2 a month, roughly $2 a month.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
And you charge $250 or $3, right?
Right.
Yeah, besides, as the point you made is besides the other things that would be bundled alongside of that, which could be, for servicing, for coming in and maybe test and inspect twice a year, or
Sure.
who knows what other, bundling along you would have with that. So.
Right. So included in that $20 is, all the updates. So anytime there's an update, we push updates out. We actually are monitoring the systems live there. So all the alerting on the back end, plus any kind of tamper or diagnostic errors, we would send to the dealers. So the dealer would know if there were any issues with the system. So all that's included in that $20.
Mike, I had a question. Where are the systems being monitored? Is it here in the United States? Is it somewhere else?
Well, it's fully automated, machine learning monitoring. We have, they reside on servers that are in 4 redundant locations.
Thank you.
Is your center UL approved?
Don't know. It's a good question. We monitor. It's monitored by Google. It's all on Google servers. So I don't know if they're not UL approved in the sense that you're asking the question, I suspect.
Right.
I mean, they're not, fire alarm UL approved monitoring stations.
And locally at the location, I guess the client's network is still the critical backbone there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if their internet goes down, then these devices do not work, correct?
That's
not
correct.
necessarily the Wi-Fi, but their internet. So it's very internet done. And is there currently a like a backup, let's say Verizon or AT&T kind of device you can put on there for that, other than?
Sure. Yeah, those are available. You can use cellular backup on the router. Lots of people make those available, and we have some people that do that are concerned. Banks, some government facilities, do have a cell backup on their internet, but most of the schools, it hasn't been a real concern.
What about the schools? We had, what was it, September or October, Google had, in Gmail and whatnot, they had a lot of internet issues all over the country with connectivity because things were getting bogged down. So,
well, interestingly, they had that particular incident was a Gmail issue, like you said, right? but we're not tied into that. We're just renting server space. And so they have multiple server locations. So if one has a problem, it automatically switches. We didn't have any outage during that time.
Okay, so there's the redundancy is put into place.
Yeah, it's all automatic. I mean, their uptime is 99 point, it's like 5 nines, I think.
Well, we are coming up on the top of the hour here, and I don't want to tie people up any longer than you have questions. So I guess I'll nudge the crowd one time. And does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to bring up? We can start to wrap up here a little bit.
Mike, you may have said it. How long has your company been around, and can you give us an idea on roughly how many of these systems are deployed?
Yeah, you know, that's been a frustrating thing. We've been around since 2016. The number, we thought that people would tout the fact that they had a gunfire detection system. And what we're finding is that most of our customers don't want people to know they have the system in. So we have suffice to say, we have a lot out there. We've been shipping for well over a year. ADI, Annixter, Wesco all do real well with it. There are a lot of systems out there. Probably 100,000 maybe in that detectors across different verticals. We're in city halls, city courts, schools, bars, restaurants, quick service retail, warehouses, corporate offices, lots of different things.
And there's no other hardware that needs installed on site.
That's correct. Just the detector. It's a really simple system. Setting it up takes almost no time. Just a couple of minutes for each detector. It's a very, very fast install.
So that actually kind of begs one of the questions, I guess, is that have you seen, I guess, any issues with the technician maybe being very qualified in the security side of the world and obviously into your part, but lacking the sophistication to understand the networking aspects of connecting to the Wi-Fi or connecting to the IP?
Well, yeah, networking is the bane of all of us, right? But it's pretty simple. What we did to alleviate or to mitigate most of those problems is the setup is actually done with Bluetooth. So you download our app on your phone. You connect to the Wi-Fi in the building. So you got to get the credentials to do that, right? So you've got those credentials in your phone already. You open up the app, and as you walk around the building, as the devices come into Bluetooth range, they automatically connect to the app. And so you hit a button, you can flash the LED on the device. So, okay, I know I'm in room 310. Let's call this one room 310. But when you make that Bluetooth connection, the app automatically downloads all the Wi-Fi credentials into the device over Bluetooth.
Oh.
So you don't have to get into any real networking stuff.
So there isn't all this port forwarding and opening up.
God, no. You don't have to do any of that. Everybody that thought they were going to get fancy and do that stuff, it just created more problems.
Oh, no. Well,
and they end up dropping that and just, we put out, I mean, our data bandwidth that we consume about a kilobyte a day. So on most networks, they don't even notice the traffic.
Yeah. Well, which also makes it much easier for the dealer and the IT department to maintain that positive relationship.
Sure.
in those facilities, because
and we've gone into some pretty secure facilities. Banks are really concerned about that. Security of our network is really, really high. These things use a 256-bit encrypted password to connect to the network. That password gets changed every hour and they're never repeated.
Wow.
So it's really hard to, I'm not going to say no one could ever hack into one of these, but it's really hard to do.
Are most installations using the Wi-Fi or the PoE, or what's the percentage? Is there
It's
like one that's
pretty
go-to?
close to an even mix.
Okay.
You know, the PoE ends up costing you a lot more because the detectors are $100 more, and you got to have a port dedicated for each device. So
Yeah.
you're buying a lot of PoE switches. The Wi-Fi is easier to set up, and it's much faster or much lower cost. And I'll be honest, I'm surprised that it's about 50-50. I really thought we'd do a lot more Wi-Fi just because of the cost issue, but a lot of people are bound and determined to do PoEs.
Does your company help with design? So if we'd send a
Absolutely.
CAD drawing or something, you guys would say, here's what you need and here's where they need to be at.
Yep, we have a design team on there. Neil heads that team, and you just reach him at our main number and just ask for support, and send him a floor plan. He'll do your layout for you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Well, Mike, I want to thank you very much for this. I think this was extremely informative. It was an area that I don't think a lot of dealers maybe understood all of the aspects of. I know there were things I picked up on I wouldn't even thought of. So I appreciate that. If people do have questions after this, what's the easiest way for them to reach out to you or your
How's the
team?
cameras working at your house there, Mike? Good.
You can always have them just reach out to me, Dale, and if they want to go over more information or whatever, I'll be more than happy to do that with them, as well as if they do have a project they want to look at. We have a design team that works at SSI in conjunction with Neil to do layouts and stuff like that as well. So whatever you guys might need, or if you need a presentation for an end user, I'm happy to do that for you.
This is why we like Mark on the board, because he knows exactly the right second to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
That's good.
It's almost like he's psychically knew at the exact right moment. So
just ask the perfect questions at the right time. So
I
it
know.
is.
Well, I've been pitching softball for a long time. So so before we hang up here real quick, I do have just a couple things I wanted to touch on for the membership as a whole. Obviously, like I said, we hopefully everyone learned a little bit today on some new ideas. One of the things that the association obviously does is provide training across a pretty broad spectrum. We have two training classes coming up in the next month. On May 5th to the 7th, we have our level 1 certified alarm technician course. So for those that are interested, there is registration information as well as course description available on our website, secureohio.org. The other course that's coming up in May is our professional fire alarm design course. So for those individuals who are looking to take the next step beyond just the service and installation and want to move up into the design levels, that course is available on May 18th and 19th. Same location for information on the website, but those are both coming up, and we have a complete calendar of events for the entire year for training also on the site. So don't hesitate to look down the calendar. You don't have to wait to the last minute to sign up. We like it when people register well in advance. Beyond that, if you need anything from the association, we're here. Reach out to us. info@secureohio.org is our email address, and or you can call the office. With that said, does anybody have any other topics, any other quick association questions that they need to bring up or want to bring up?
I'd like to thank everybody. That was very informative. Thank you.
So it was very good. Alan, anything you want to throw in at the end?
No, I just say the same thing. This is very, very good presentation, and thanks to our speaker. Very, very interesting. Thank you.
So keep an eye on your email. We do have another one of these scheduled in May. Our speaker will be Ron Davis, who will be speaking on new ways to look at the valuation of alarm companies. It's not just about selling the business, it's about things that you can look at if you're considering maybe expanding and acquiring some businesses. So Ron Davis, clearly an icon in the industry, is going to give us some of his time to talk about a lot of different things that can help improve your business in a lot of different ways. So keep an eye on your email for that.
Okay.
What's today?
Do you have a date on that yet?
It is, I don't have it on one of the many screens open right now. I do not have it on it. So
Okay.
it's in May.
Good. Okay. That was great.
No one has anything. Again, Mike, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for
Everyone
having me.
else, thank you for attending, and have a great day. Unfortunately, you'll have to go back to work now.
Yeah.
So, have a good one. Take care.
You.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.